Hey guys, today we have Dhruv and he is having total 3.5 years of experience in Java, Spring Boot and microservices. Hey, hello Dhruv, how are you?
I'm good, Faizan. How are you?
Yes, I'm also good. Shall we start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, can you please introduce yourself and your recent project in brief, Dhruv?
Yeah, so my name is Dhruv Singla. I have around 3.5 years experience in building microservices using Spring Boot and Java. Most of my work has revolved around building event-driven architectures. So currently, I'm working on a service that uh, basically personalizes the user experience
Mhm.
as part of the Coin D6 platform. Yeah.
Okay, so Dhruv, let's say you have a shared cache used by multiple threads. You used a hash
Mm-hmm.
map, but data is getting corrupted. What could be the issue and
Mm-hmm.
how will you fix it?
If okay, let me think about it. If we have a kind of a single cache and multiple, it is changed by multiple threads. What we can do instead of having a map, we can hash map. We can use a concurrent hash map
Concurrent hash map.
that is basically thread safe. And
Okay.
if we have uh, if we want to have a very consistent hash map on every reads, we can
Mm-hmm.
also use hash tables in which all the methods are synchronized, so we don't get any inconsistent data on reads.
Got it, got it. Okay, so let's say you overwrite equals method but not hash code in a class used as a key in a hash map. What
Mhm.
problems can arise?
So if we do not override, let's say, the hash code,
Mm-hmm.
and only override the equals method, so it might be the case that the when we calculate the hash, or when the
Mm-hmm.
when the hash is calculated internally, it might go to the different buckets for the, let's say, for the object having the same values,
Mm-hmm.
and it will be kind of difficult to find, where that particular bucket when we are going to retrieve the elements or the objects.
Two equal objects may have different hash codes causing incorrect behavior, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so can you tell me about the design patterns that you are aware of?
So I have used Singleton design pattern. I have used
What's the
builder
best
design
way to
patterns.
implement
Yeah.
singleton design pattern?
I think the best way is to use enum.
Enum.
Singleton design pat
Okay.
single yeah, it's three enums. Yeah.
So how, can you tell me how can we implement singleton design pattern through enum and how it is thread safe?
Um. So that was the point of using the enums, that it is thread safe, so we can
Mm-hmm.
basically just have a enum on we can just basically declare a enum, and inside that enum, let's say, enum class, what we
Mm-hmm.
can do is we can declare a static method of get instance, or we can just have a static methods on whichever operation we want to do in the enum.
Okay. Yep, yep. Enum is actually by default thread safe because of
Yep.
JVM. JVM makes it thread safe. Okay. And you
Okay.
said you have worked on builder pattern. Can you tell me the use case where you have worked in your project?
Yeah, so builder pattern is mostly used when we have a lot of, optional fields. So when we have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of conditions that if this
Mm-hmm.
field should be declared as part of the object creation or not. So at
Okay.
that point of time, we use the builder pattern. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Hey guys, I want to share something important with you. Actually, Dhruv prepared from our interview preparation kit and cracked multiple interviews. We have also referred him to the multiple companies. So let me tell you, this interview preparation kit has four main parts. First is complete interview preparation material. It is a step-by-step material made by me, expert and MNC's interviewers. 99% of the questions asked in interviews are covered in it. Second is two real enterprise client projects. Code and video recorded sessions are there and you can add this in your resume. Third is lifetime chat support. Here you can ask your doubts anytime. Fourth is referral support. Here we help you to get referred to the top MNCs. And guys, before moving to our interview, since Dhruv is already here, so we can ask for our feedback. So Dhruv, can you please go ahead?
Yeah, it's basically a full-on course kind of a thing. It
Mm-hmm.
gives us, insights on, every tricky question, especially, you can
Mm-hmm.
get in the interview. So yeah, that helped a lot.
Okay, thank you, Dhruv. So now moving to our interview. Okay, so Dhruv, let's say you need to store large data, access it in insertion order, and perform fast lookups. Which collection would you choose and why?
If you want to store a large data, like just want to clarify, the data is in like which format? Is it a key value format, or if you want to have
No, no, no.
very
Yeah,
fast
yeah.
look?
Key value pair.
If it's key value pairs, then the fast lookup using the keys hash map. And
But you have to
if we want
maintain
to
the
just
insertion order.
okay, if we have to maintain the insertion order, then array list is the best
But
collections.
can array list store a key value pair?
We can basically have a custom class inside of array list, like instead of just declaring an integer or let's say or any wrapper class, we can introduce a
Okay.
custom class over here.
Cannot we
Yeah,
use linked hash map?
linked hash map. Yeah, that also we can use. Yeah, it's I think
It
hash map and linked list combination. Yeah,
yep. It maintains the insertion order and offers O1 average lookup time, right?
yeah, right.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell me the internal working of linked hash map?
Of linked hash map.
Yep.
Uh, so um, so it treats like it. I think most of the use case, if it's we want to design a, let's say, LRU cache or something,
Mm-hmm.
where we want to have instant lookups and where we
Mm-hmm.
also want to store the insertion order. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever there is a new node that comes into the that we want to insert into the linked hash map, it gets appended, to
Mm-hmm.
the at the first or at the last based upon the which
Okay.
algorithm we use or which how we want to basically have our implementation of the linked hash map.
Okay.
And that's how like it maintains the order as well as the constant lookup times.
The working is same as hash map, but here additionally we use linked list or doubly linked list, I think, to maintain the insertion order, right?
Right, yes,
Yep.
yes, it's
And
doubly linked list. Yeah.
treefication or buckets or collision, everything is same as hash map.
Right, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so why do we use synchronized keyword?
Synchronized keywords is used when we have, let's say, multiple threads operating on the same function or a
Mm-hmm.
block of
Mm-hmm.
code. So
Mm-hmm.
it basically makes the function or that block of code a very thread safe.
Mm-hmm.
Only let's say it blocks it blocks that part of code when one thread is executing on that code and
Mm-hmm.
make the other threads wait for it, so that there is no data inconsistency in that.
Okay. What will happen if you remove an element from array list while iterating over it using an enhanced for loop or normal for loop?
Um, I am not quite sure, but it's always advised not to operate or remove elements while operate in the sense add or remove elements while
Mm.
operating on a collections sort. But
Because array list
I
is
think
not a thread safe.
yes, it's not
It will
threat safe.
throw
Yeah.
concurrent modification exception.
Okay. Okay.
Because the enhanced for loop uses an iterator that detects structural modifications, right?
Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Okay. So, Dhruv, let's say you have a complex object with optional fields, right? How would the
Mm-hmm.
builder pattern help here compared to the telescoping constructors?
I'm not aware of the telescoping constructors. Like, I think you mean that we have a multiple constructors
Yep. Multiple
with
constructor,
multiple
too many
fields.
parameters.
Yeah, yeah. So if we have, let's say, multiple constructors
Mm-hmm.
having, multiple parameters accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say if at some point of time we want to introduce one more variable, then it kinds of
Mm-hmm.
either we introduce one more constructor or either we edit the current constructor with one more parameter. So
Mm-hmm.
it requires certain code changes. But in case of builder pattern, since we already have a builder class in that, and we just want to add another, we can just
Mm-hmm.
add another method and field inside the builder class, and we can just basically create the object based upon the our configurations. So
Okay.
it basically keeps the code modular.
Okay. So, in the solid principle, can you explain Liskov substitutions and interface segregations with real examples?
I'll go with the, let's say, interface segregation principle, in which basically we want to segregate the interfaces
Mm-hmm.
to a certain level. We
Mm-hmm.
let's say, for example, there is a bird interface,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say there is a penguin class, and let's say
Mm-hmm.
there is a, let's say, sparrow class,
Mm-hmm.
which is extending. So if we, let's say, have a void fly in
Mm-hmm.
in the bird interface, so it does not so we will be basically overriding the method in the penguin class
Mm-hmm.
and just throwing an exception that this basically is not a function of this class. So we want to kind of segregate the interface in such a way that it makes sense, and it is basically
Mm-hmm.
we can keep the code clean in such a way that it should basically extends implements only those interfaces which it needs the
Mm-hmm.
class basically implements. In case of Liskov substitution principle, it's like when the children classes, the children class basically should be always be replaceable with the parent class. It should not break the functionality.
Mm-hmm.
I can give the same example. Let's say if let's say there is a or let's say there is a vehicle interface in which
Mm-hmm.
there is a engine method, and let's say someone bicycle is going to implement that method.
Mm-hmm.
So it should always be interchangeable. Let's say if I change the vehicle to, let's say, a cycle class, then it will break the functionality of the engine method. So it should always be interchangeable with the parent class.
Got it.
So that's the both the principles.
Correct, correct. Okay. So, Dhruv, um, in a singleton class, forget about enum implementation. Okay, as of
Mm-hmm.
now. Can we still create multiple instances if we are applying double locking or thread save? We made a thread save singleton class, but still, can we create multiple instances?
Um, that so we basically the whole purpose of the singleton class is to have a single instance in the
Mm-hmm.
application. So if we have like a synchronized keywords, volatile
Mm-hmm.
instance, as well as we basically do the null checking first also in that synchronized block, that if the current instance
Mm-hmm.
exists or not, then I don't think that if let's say multiple threads, even if they want to have a call the get instance method in singleton class, there should always be a one single instance.
Okay,
So
so
I don't
can we
think there is a
create multiple instances via reflection or serialization?
yeah reflections will, because it bypasses that
It bypasses
we can yeah
it,
it bypasses that method constructor method.
and we can prevent it by using enum singleton
Yeah, yeah,
or by
yeah.
preventing reflection with the guards and overriding read resolve for serialization. Okay. Okay. So Dhruv, you want to avoid creating too many threads, but at the same time need to run many tasks. What
Mhm.
pattern or framework would you use in multi-threading environment?
So there is
Forget about pattern.
executor
Yep, yep. Go ahead.
there is this executor service that we
Mm-hmm.
can implement, that basically in which we can basically design gives the count of the thread. Let's say new fixed thread pool, if we want to run
Mm-hmm.
10 threads in parallel, and then we can call the execute functions on the tasks that is implemented by a runnable interface,
Mm-hmm.
and we can pass those tasks into those executors service. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how we can basically manage multi-threading without without explicitly making threads on our own
Mm-hmm.
using that thread class. So yeah, that is one of the way.
Mm, correct, correct. Okay, so can you tell me thread pool about thread pool? Why do we use it? Or have you used the thread pool concepts in your project, any personal project or professional project?
I've used in the personal project also. So
Okay.
basically, a thread pool is a collection of threads, in
Mm-hmm.
which either we can also make a thread pool, manually by creating all the threads, let's say for running a for loop or however you want to
Mm-hmm.
create it. But the the pattern we use, it's mostly it's the executor service
Mm-hmm.
that we use to create a thread pool that we don't have to manage
Mm-hmm.
manually. So JVM
Mm-hmm.
manages us for that. Yeah.
Got it, got it. Okay. So Dhruv, let's say you need a collection that supports very frequent reads but occasional writes. What would you choose between hash map, collections dot synchronize map, and concurrent hash map?
Can you please repeat the question? Sorry, I did not get that.
Okay. You need a collection that supports very frequent reads but
Mm-hmm.
occasional writes. What would you
Okay.
choose between hash map, collections dot synchronize map, and concurrent hash map?
I would use either concurrent hash map or a hash map. Not definitely not the hash table or the synchronized block, because it blocks the
So why
entire,
would you choose hash map?
uh, hash map, because we have a very frequent reads. Let's say we do not have that much of writes. But yeah, if let's say two threads
But
want
in
to
worst
have a,
case,
if you yeah, yeah, in worst case I will go always go for the concurrent hash map,
mm-hmm,
because in that case I will not have any data consistency for that
mm-hmm.
particular read bucket. Yeah.
Okay. And why wouldn't you use synchronized map?
Synchronized map, because it will it the all the functions are synchronized. So even let's say if I'm reading it, so unless one thread is basically executes the function, or let's say
Mm-hmm,
reads the value, the another thread is still blocked.
mm-hmm,
That is not the kind of experience which I want to give to the user in case of when the user is only reading the value.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct, correct. Synchronized map basically logs the entire map. So
Yeah.
we won't use this in this scenario. Okay, got it. Um, okay, so let's say you want each user session in a multi-threaded application to maintain its own instance of a variable. What Java
Mhm.
concept would you use?
um if we want to maintain a,
If
so we
we
have to
want,
basically
Mhm.
yeah, can you please repeat the question?
Let's say we want each user session in a multi-threaded application to maintain its own instance of a variable.
Mm-hmm.
What Java concept would you use in a multi-threading environment?
See, is it like we need to basically have a prototype something that it every time it creates a new win. But in case of Java, yeah,
Have you heard
I
about
have to think
thread
about
local?
it. No, no, I have not
Yeah, yeah.
about thread
There is a
local.
concept we should use thread local to store variables unique to each thread.
Okay, okay, got it.
Okay. Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, let's say if a variable is declared volatile, is it guaranteed that thread operations on it are atomic?
No, no, no.
Why?
Volatile only makes sure that
Visibility.
visibility on that part, that all the threads will be basically any change will be visible to all the threads
Mm-hmm.
at that particular instant of time. Yeah,
Got it, got
you
it.
still have to apply the atomic reference on that variable.
Can a hash map have null keys and values?
Hash map can have null key
And concurrent
values.
hash map?
Yeah, no, concurrent does not
Why?
support null values. Uh, not quite sure of the reason, but yeah, I
Due
know
to
that it does
the
not support it.
data inconsistency issue.
Okay, okay, cool.
Mhm. Okay, so let's say you have a Spring Boot application where two users can update the same record simultaneously. How would you prevent race conditions?
Again, that we can use synchronized. Let's say in the
Hmm.
method that we have, we can use synchronized method.
Okay,
Uh, yeah.
so now,
Uh,
okay, sorry to stop you. Now I'm just looking the answer related to the locking.
okay. Uh, we can also use the atomic reference in the variable that the user is trying to update. I'm not quite sure, like if there
Okay,
any
so have you
Spring
heard
Boot.
about optimistic locking and pessimistic locking? Database locks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So we keeps the version number,
Hmm.
in let's say the in both the lockings also. So in the
Hmm.
passive in the optimistic locking, we check the version number. Let's say we have a current version one and user
Hmm.
updated the value. We update the version two, version one from version two.
Hmm.
And if the user two again,
Hmm.
basically have a request at the same point of time, we just check if their version mismatches, then
Hmm.
we basically retry it. If even after retry it fails, then we
Hmm.
give the user the error. But if if there is if there is the version number matches, or the we can basically complete
Hmm.
that operation, then we increment the version to version 3. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so can you tell me, we all know the advantages of a Spring Boot very well. Okay,
Hmm.
I just want to know the advantages as well as a few disadvantages if we have in our Spring Boot application or Spring Boot framework.
Okay, advantages, it's basically gives us a lot of things out of the box, reduces a lot of boilerplate code,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
gives us the auto configurations. We
Mm-hmm.
don't have to run our own servers. It
Mm-hmm.
gives embedded servers, let's say Tomcat or Jetty.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of configurations and dependency injections, which is
Mm-hmm.
automatically done by Spring Boot. We don't have to manage the life cycles of the beans also. uh, Spring Boot automatically manages that. Coming to the disadvantages part of it, I think I can think of one disadvantage, or I would not even like say kind of say disadvantage, but there is a, let's say, lot of methods, methods to achieve, let's say, basically a one thing. If it can basically grow into a lot of complexity also. For example, let's say if service A depends on B, B depends upon C, and then if we declare if we do not handle if we do not handle it correctly, and C again kind of depends upon A, then it's got a lot of starting
Mm-hmm.
errors like circular dependency issues.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of
Correct.
the disadvantages that I can think of, like having a very complicated architecture in Spring
And
Boot
sometimes
applications.
auto configuration becomes bottleneck when the application is very complex, creating beans and all, right? And sometimes annotations, because we have a lot of annotations sometimes. So remember those. That's also
Y- Yeah.
not good in
Yeah.
Spring Boot. Okay. Can you tell me how does Spring Boot auto configuration work internally?
So Spring Boot auto configuration, it kind of scans the starter dependencies what are
Mm-hmm.
there from the POM XML file, and it
Mm-hmm.
then it's based upon those dependencies, it creates the bean and injects the bean into the application
Mm-hmm.
context. For example, if we have a, let's say, web starter dependency, then it auto creates those web starter beans that are needed for that, and we
Mm-hmm.
can basically just use, let's say, add the address controller on the controller, and it can implement service and repository layers. And so in this case, basically you will have an endpoint running
Mm-hmm.
in one go. Also, like we can also there is the auto configuration also takes care of
Mm-hmm.
all the configuration beans
Mm-hmm.
that we have declared in our let's say application files, or the on the config files.
Mm-hmm.
That also is taken care by the enable auto configuration annotation by Spring Boot.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so let's say you have a legacy application without a Spring context. How would Spring Boot simplify the migration?
Without any,
Without
sorry.
a Spring context.
Okay, without like a Spring context, I'm assuming it's application context, or let's
Yeah,
say
yes,
bean
yes.
factory kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah. A Spring Framework context means the core functionality of a Spring Framework.
Yeah, so we are kind of migrating the project from that is written in Spring to Spring
Mm-hmm.
Boot. Is it? Okay, so in Spring Boot, as I mentioned that there are Spring Boot reduces a lot of boilerplate
Mm-hmm.
code. We just have to kind of maintain a dependency file in the POM XML file, and we need to declare, let's say we have a data source, that also we need to just create a data source bean
Mm-hmm.
in case we want to migrate the we want to have a DB migrations also. So if it's almost like 90% of it is handled by the enable auto configuration, that is part of Spring Boot at the Spring Boot application annotation. So yeah, the migration kind of becomes a much easier task when it comes to migrating projects from Spring to Spring Boot.
Mm, got it. Okay, so let's say your application starts very slowly. How would you debug startup performance issues in Spring Boot?
Okay, it's starting up very slowly. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
might be the case that we have a lot of let's say aspect oriented programming where we are performing very high operations, very,
Mm-hmm.
time consuming operations, while let's say creating a bean, or we have a, let's say, very time consuming tasks at the time of, at
Mm-hmm.
the time of booting up the Spring Boot application. Also might be the case that, we have multiple data sources. So I think the Spring Boot application also provides the actuator endpoints, slash metrics, in which, we can see what's the boot up application time,
Mm-hmm.
or how each API is kind of, taking up the time. So that's one of the point where I will go in order to debug the application.
Got it, got it. And actually, in latest Java version, we could use the concept Java Flight Recorder.
Okay.
Profile startups, right? We could check the metrics.
Mhm.
And lazy bean, there is a concept of lazy bean initialization we can do.
Mhm. Mhm.
When we need the bean, then only initialize at that time, not at the
Right.
startup time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, can you ex can you tell me the difference between application.properties and application.yaml?
They are both used to have the config, variables. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just the YAML will have the I think both have the YAML context. I'm not quite
Mm-hmm.
sure, like, if we can also, yeah, basically auto switch it if we want to have use the application
So what
YAML,
do
we
you
can use
use?
I mainly use application YAML.
I mean, in your career, did you get a chance to create a custom Spring Boot starter, your own Spring Boot starter?
Nope, nope, I have not created any custom
Why
Spring
do
Boot
we use
starter.
Spring Boot starters?
So Spring Boot starter is a dependency that, it's by the name of it's it's the dependency that will basically have all the, all the entities, all the dependencies that reside within them.
Mm-hmm.
For example, let's say we have a Spring Boot security starter, so it all already comes with a, by default, I think it by default is username password, dependency also. So that's one of the reason, we use starter dependencies, so that we can basically have a auto configuration on those dependencies.
Okay, got it. Let's say you want to load different configurations for dev and prod. How do you manage multiple profiles in Spring Boot?
One of the um, okay, we can use basically Spring profile concept in that, where we
Mm-hmm.
have, separate application. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
if you use application properties, we can have separate application dev,
Mm-hmm.
application prod, or application, let's say, test
Mm-hmm.
dot properties file, and we can use @profile annotation and
Mm-hmm.
on the configuration classes. So accordingly, the variables will get populated, and we can have different variable environments for different environments, basically.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so Dhruv, tell me five important annotations, Spring Boot annotations that we use in our day-to-day task, or I mean, that are very important, and we cannot write a code without those. And also another five annotations that is not mandatory, but yes, important that we don't use regularly. I mean, that we use frequently. Sorry, don't use frequently.
Uh,
Sorry to confuse
Okay,
you.
okay, okay, okay. So it's okay. So coming to the five important notification that we use is first of all is like at the rate Spring Boot application. It's the, the starting point of how the Spring Boot application starts up, basically. Then coming to the, let's say, the controller service and
Mm-hmm.
repository architecture of it, we use at the rest controller. That is basically the starting point of the, how our APIs are defined.
Mm-hmm.
Then coming to the service layer is basically at the rate service annotation is there, in
Mm-hmm.
which we basically have all the business logic. And then comes the at the rate repository annotation, in
Mm-hmm.
which, we have all the data, all the connections, where basically takes care all the CRUD operations that we perform
Mm-hmm.
on the DB.
Mm-hmm.
Then one more annotation that I can think of is at the rate auto-wired, or like right now, like it's not needed in case of, setter injection, or
Better
as well as
injection.
constructor injection. It only required in field injection, but there is another annotation right at the rate configuration that we use, in day to day, because it in that we want to inject our dependent variables
Mm-hmm.
according to the different
Correct,
environments.
correct.
So yeah, these are the five annotations that
Mm-hmm.
we use in day to day. Uh, Let me check if I can basically remember the five annotation that we don't use, but yeah, it's still useful. One of the thing is at the rate bean. When basically when we use at the rate bean when we want to have a a third party dependency in our
Mm-hmm.
application code. So if we do not have any third party
Mm-hmm.
or we do not need a a very let's say we do not need that much control over the bean creation,
Mm-hmm.
then we can use basically at the rate bean. But yeah, it if does not make sense if we do not have any
Mm-hmm.
third party dependency or any use case of that. Second is at the rate auto add. Now it's it's not needed now because we do not implement field injection nowadays. Third one is, let's say, if we have only one data source, we do not need to implement at the rate primary. So if we have multiple data sources, in that case also we want to implement if we want to decide which is the primary data source. So at the rate if we don't have it, so I would suggest not to use at the rate primary. Fourth one is, let's say,
Async
me
annotation.
yeah, async annotation. If we do not have any asynchronous process, then it does not make sense to use asynchronous at the rate async annotation.
Mm-hmm.
And fifth one is uh, at, let's say if we have some if we do not need any caching on the
Mm. Enable
on our
caching.
Spring Boot application, yeah, we do not want to use that at the rate enable cache,
Mm.
or let's say cache await or cacheable at the rate cacheable annotations if we do not have any need of caching
Mm.
the results.
Correct, correct. Okay, and also now tell me, the question is same. The now you have to tell me about the git commands. Just tell me two, three git commands that we use in our day-to-day task, and two, three git commands that we don't use but are important.
Okay. First one is init because we want to initialize it as a Git repository.
Mm.
That's the first step. And if you want to, we should have a regular, fetch from the to
Fetch.
basically have the latest update on all the
Mm.
branches of the Git. So it's Git fetch. We also use, Git pull to basically
Pull.
pull all the, remote changes into our
Git
local
push.
repository, and Git push to push our,
Mm.
to push our commits.
Mm.
Uh,
Now tell me
uh,
that we don't use day-to-day task.
okay. So in day-to-day task, okay. I have not used, to be honest, that much Git bisect, where
Okay.
where we basically go over a binary search that which to find out which commit is a bad commit and which
Mm.
commit introduce the bug.
Mm.
But yeah, it's quite useful when we have let's say hundreds of commits and we want to
Mm.
find a bad commit. The second one is, I have not used that much is
Get cherry pick.
let's say get cherry pick. I have quite frequently used, but yeah,
Oh,
I would prefer not to not to use get cherry pick commands
get
because
stash.
unless yeah, git stash also is one of the command when you basically just want to stash the
Mm.
changes or when you want to save the changes in our local only and do not want to basically push it. So have a cleaning,
Mm.
working directory from the scratch. So yeah, these are the couple of
Mm.
commands that I don't use normally. So
Got it, got it. Okay, so Dhruv, I think it's done from my end, and yes, it was a very, very nice interview.